Welcome back to another episode of the Pilots of the Caribbean podcast, where we talk about everything drones and the people in the Caribbean that use them. You can find this podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you get your podcasts. So make sure to like and subscribe. Now, for this week's episode, if you live in the Caribbean region and you've seen any form of local TV, regardless of what island you're from, I guarantee you have seen this person's work. So I'm not even going to talk any more about it. Without further ado, please enjoy this week's episode with Mr. Phil Archer. The man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Phil Archer. Thank you for coming on to the Pilots of the Caribbean podcast. So how are you going today?
Hey, Alan. How you doing? Fine, thanks. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem, man. Thank you very much for coming on.
Of course.
Now, Phil, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for the persons that aren't in the audience that aren't familiar with you?
Sure. My name is Phil Archer. I am a producer, fixer, and a professional drone operator. So I'm born in Barbados, and I'm actually half Trini. My mom is Trini, and I got quite most of my family's in Trinidad actually, and I've worked around the Caribbean, filming with a drone, and also producing for television and commercials and that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, so I know that for persons that may not be familiar with you directly, chances are they've seen something that you've done or you've been a part of. And how is it that you found yourself in that media space?
Well, I actually started off quite young as a musician. My whole family is musically inclined. You might remember Spice and Company. Alan Shepard is my uncle. And my mum is a singer. My grandmother was a professional piano player till well into her 80s. And so I grew up in a musical, family. Every party was a concert kind of thing. And that's how I started in media. I started as a professional singer in duos and bands from my teenage years into my 20s. And I got interested in the technical side of things. So I started looking for schools for sound engineering for live sound. And when I started school, I fell in love with the studio space. Like big SSL 9000 and Neve desks. And, back then, I'm dating myself here. Back then they were still using tape machines. And digital was only now coming in. I think, Pro Tools was in its infancy back then. Right. That was like the late 90s. And I studied recording engineering in Florida and came back and started working at a recording studio in Barbados for 3 years. And then started my own studio called Crucial Productions. And at that point, it was just, literally a traditional recording studio, where I recorded, people like Rupee, Alison Hines, Crossfire, local artists, a Trini band called Treason. I don't know if you remember them.
Mm-hmm. Tree Sons now. Well, they were Tree Sons and then they went their separate ways.
Yeah, correct. So we recorded, I think, their last album. And then, I started to realize that the music industry was a bit too seasonal for my liking. Everything was only around crop over. So I started breaking into advertising, where the first studio I worked in was actually an advertising production studio. So I started doing that more. And I got the opportunity to work on sound design for animated shorts and commercials and that sort of thing. And following that, I got the opportunity to produce some animation, which then led me into the visual realm. And I absolutely fell in love with it. So, I get bored easy, and I'm always sort of looking to learn the next sort of trade or next sort of direction in my career, and really fell in love with the filmmaking process. And, I really loved sound design when I was an engineer. That was probably a field I was going to go in if I had kept on that audio path, Foley design and that sort of thing. And adding the imagery layer really sort of closed the circle for me, coming up with a concept and bringing it to fruition on the screen with audio design and sound design was really something that fulfilled me in a big way. So that's how I got into the media space in terms of television and film and that sort of thing. And
I'm not sure if you're aware, but you are a big deal in the media space in Trinidad.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, that's good to know.
You are. Yeah.
That's very cool. Glad to hear it. Yeah.
Yeah. And people hear, Phil, we talking to Phil London, and it's like, wow, oh, yeah. Okay, cool.
Wow. Well, I didn't know that, but that's good to hear. Cool.
Yeah, man. Go ahead.
So yeah, that's basically my story. I'm always my mindset is always one of growth and learning. I always, like I said, I always keep my eye on technology and what's happening. I'm using AI quite a lot now in my field of work. And, right. I'm a nerd at heart, right? So I'm always finding out what's the next big thing coming up and, reading up about it as much as I can.
Okay. So when did you start integrating drones into what it is you're doing now?
Well, I would say that's probably around 2018. I really started getting into it. Growing up as a kid, I always loved a RC car and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And,
and Skeletrix and stuff.
Exactly. We actually had an old Skeletrix set when I was growing up in the 80s. I belong to my brother. So I think I got my first drone from Ricky Redman, who's a producer in Barbados. And, it was a Phantom 4 Advanced. And, it was really difficult to get at the time because, in Barbados back then in 2018, drones were pretty much banned outright. The government administration at the time, there was no legislation in place, and basically they just dropped the ban because they weren't familiar with the technology. They got paranoid about it. I'm sure the old usual tropes that people who are not aware of the industry are afraid of. They're afraid of privacy. They're afraid of security, that sort of stuff. So a big ban got dropped on Barbados, and I found a secondhand Phantom 4 and started playing around with it at an open airfield in Barbados, and that's how I got into it. But what really turned me on to the potential in the tech is I actually got the opportunity to work with Sky TV Netflix collaboration where they sent the location producer down, and he had a little DJI Spark. Right. He was a location producer, and that was his tool. That was how he scouted. He went to a location, he put it up, he looked around, any interesting places he saw, he would fly it over there and record it for the location. And that was just sort of like my mind opened up at that point. I was like, wow, this is an amazing tool. That is a fantastic asset to have as a producer or a fixer, because you get bird's eye view of any location you want. And, that's how it started for me as a tool to use in my producing. Instantly fell in love with it. From there, I pretty much, the bug bit me, and I was playing as much as I could. Every secondhand drone I could find, I pretty much purchased. I think I had a Mavic 1 Platinum. I had, what was the smaller one than the Spark? It was a Trello. I can't remember.
That was the one you could program with the prop guards. Yeah, the Trello.
Yeah. I got whatever I could get my hands on. I flew and I tried out, and, it was great. I used it in some commercials and, some tourism spots and stuff like that. Social media, obviously, for my own use and clients. And, I think the first big opportunity I got. So a part of my job as a fixer is I assist foreign crew in coming from whatever country they're coming from to enter the country. They get their work permits processed through me and the government, and all of the customs and immigration and permits and whatever they need, I fix it. That's why it's called a fixer. Mm-hmm. Nothing to do with the mafia, just to be clear. And so part of that was dealing with drone permits and dealing with the Prime Minister's office and all the stakeholders that are involved in the permitting process, because Barbados is quite strict, and I'm pretty sure it's like Trinidad as well. Actually, I know it is because I just had to go through that process last year.
Yep.
And I was doing this for an Indian company that was coming in to use the drone as a live drone for the CPL 2019 championship. So I had only been flying for about a year at that point. And so I did the whole 9 yards. You know, they needed that for the entire Caribbean, but I was only working in Barbados at the time. And they got me to get their drone pilots, all the permits and all of that. And I get a call. I think they were supposed to land on the Wednesday. I get a call on the Sunday, panicked by the producer in India, saying that their main pilot had got into the US and they got turned back because he didn't have all the appropriate visa and paperwork. So the drone, it was an Inspire 2 team. And basically the camera operator, and you know, they have a dual system. The camera operator had his permit. He went to Trinidad, and the pilot in command got sent back to India. So they panicked and said, Phil, we know that you're a drone operator as well. Are you interested in going on tour with the CPL championships for 6 weeks? You would have to leave day after tomorrow. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm not going to say no, but my caveat is I've never flown an Inspire 2 in my life. I've only flown Mavics and, you know, everything up to an Inspire 2. I had never flown that. They put me on the phone with the owner of the company, and he had a chat. He's like, well, it's the same thing, kind of same operator. It's just a bigger drone. And I was like, man, look, if you're going to take the chance on me, I'll take the risk and do it. So count me in. Luckily, my partner was very understanding, and she was like, look, this is a great opportunity. Go along. So within 24 to 36 hours, I packed my bags for 6 weeks and left Barbados to go on tour with the CPL 2019 championships.
Oh, that must have been fun.
It was fun, but it was very scary. I'll be honest with you. So I landed in Trinidad, never flown an Inspire 2 before. I think I had like maybe one test flight where I got to feel, you know, it's like going from flying a Mavic 2, which is what I was flying at the time, to flying an Inspire 2 is like driving a Toyota and then getting in a Maserati. So, you know, that was the speed, the control, the power of the drone was a lot to get used to. And, yeah, it was scary. So the first job was in Queen's Park Oval for the first match of the series. The stadium was packed. And you know the noise and the canal that goes on.
Section, everything. Yeah.
So we're on the roof of, I think it was the Western Pavilion, Queen's Park. It was the T20. So, you know, it's at night. So the sun's going down and it's all live, right? So we have a live feed connected to BNC to the sentence controller we were using for the Inspire 2. All live. The producer comes on the earphones and says, all right, drone team, your first shot is the first shot of the season. The whole series, we're going live in 10 minutes. And I've never flown a drone. And as you know, Queen's Park is a heavily controlled airspace. There's embassies, hospitals, you know, all kind of like, we really could not fly beyond the boundary of the oval. So we had to stay over the roof. Police were right behind us monitoring the entire thing. So the drone team from the Trinidad police were right behind us, making sure we were behaving properly. And, you know, this live broadcast is going to 5 million people across the world. And the first shot for the entire series was on my drone.
It's yours.
And you could, no pressure. You could imagine exactly. And it was great. You know, the camera operator was fantastic. And we got a fantastic shot of the sunset going over the oval, launching the series. And that was how it went. But that opportunity really kicked off my love for commercial work for drone. Live drone operating is a different beast altogether. Cause you know, when you get a shot, you fly back, you do it a million times until you get it right and you're good. Live drone operating is always on. Director can come to you in a matter of seconds. If he sees a good shot that you're on, you're live, and
That's it.
That's it.
You have to hold that shot.
So you're always on for the entire 30, 40 minutes that you're in the air.
Yeah.
And it is a lot of pressure, and it is scary and exciting and fun all at the same time. And it was I mean, we flew to 6 different countries: Trinidad, Guyana, not Grenada, St. Kitts, St. Lucia. I think Trinidad was 2 or 3 times, and it was amazing. You know, the hotel and the whole camaraderie of the team, the production team. It was one of the best experiences I've had. And it really got me grounded in commercial operating by fire. Like we almost got blown off one of the roofs of the Oval in St. Lucia with a freak squall. I think there's footage of it somewhere. Basically, the squall came through. You know, we were the only people left on the team on the entire thing because the rain started to come down. But we were on a roof, so we didn't have time to get down. So we basically had to huddle and protect our gear. And yeah, it was wild. And then the St. Kitts Oval is actually next to their airport. So we had to coordinate all of this with
flights coming in
and that sort of thing. And we were taking off from a very small roof with 4 air conditioning condensers around us, blowing air up. And then there's a crosswind that when it hits the roof, say this is the roof of the crosswind comes up, hits and goes across. So there's wind going up from the AC units and then a crosswind coming across. And we have to take off and fly into that to get out.
Trial by fire, boy.
It was hairy, but you know, I learned so much in that time and made some great friends from, you know, the team in India. And it was fantastic.
And Phil, you know, you're talking about that story, and I don't know if you remember this, but I think that is the first time you and I would have interacted, and we would not have actually spoken to each other again until years after. Because I believe that year you guys needed to rent batteries for the Inspire 2.
That was you?
Yes.
I did not remember that. I remember that now. Yeah.
My friend and I bought a Phantom 4 and he bought an Inspire 2 the year before. And then when you guys, somebody locally put out that they were looking for batteries for Inspire 2. So I asked him, hey, you rent these batteries? He's like, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
And I responded and organized the rental for you guys.
Yep. I remember that. I did not remember that it was you though. Wow. Well, you know, the Caribbean's a small place. And what happened is that I don't know if you're probably aware of this, but when you're flying with large batteries, you can only fly with 2 on your person.
Yeah.
And so they had 2. The camera operator for the Inspire 2, I think he snuck another 2 in. But the pilot in command that got sent back to India, he had the other batteries.
The rest. Yeah.
So we put out an APB and all these social media groups in Barbados and Trinidad. And yeah, so wow, cool. Very cool. I think we got some from David Lewis in Barbados and some from you guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think you gotten 2 or 3. I think it was 2 sets from us. Right.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. And so they traveled the Caribbean with us, and we had to hand 2 to all the other film crew as well, because I think we had something like 12 batteries total once we rented all of them.
So everybody had a pair with them to go on.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, man.
How have you all how did you all deal with the ban on drones in Barbados at that time? And like, how has it changed to now? Because one of the things I don't know that, well, most listeners who not familiar with you wouldn't know that you were a member of the board of the BOEVA, Barbados Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Association.
Correct.
Are you still a member of that? And how have you all dealt with that change from then to now?
Yeah, I'm still a member, and I still advise, you know, when certain issues come up. And, you know, I was one of the founding members of the organization. And that was basically, the organization was founded to address the ban in general, to sort of represent the drone operating community in Barbados, and to try and lobby government to say, hey, you know what? You've put a ban on this, industry, essentially. An entire industry that is burgeoning. At that time, I think the industry was worth something like 8 billion, and that was 2016. And so, you know, that's basically why we formed the organization. Graham Finlayson was the president, at the time. I think I came in as the PRO. And that was our reaction. We put out some social media. We tried to organize, and the ban was lifted by the BLP shortly after that, but still very, very restricted. You had to have really, really strict requirements to be a legitimate operator. And there were several stakeholders. There's the police, there's the Prime Minister's office, there's a defense force, and of course, civil aviation. And each of those stakeholders have to approve of a flight before it's green lit. So it's quite an arduous
red tape. Yeah.
It's quite a lot of red tape. And then to get a drone in, that's even worse, because then you have to deal with customs, and you have to have what's considered a legitimate purpose. So you have to have a business that either requests your drone operating work, or you have to have a business that directly uses drones, like inspection or film and video production or that sort of thing. So there's a lot of red tape. It's still like that. It's a bit better. I'll definitely say that things have improved and the system has improved. It's all online now. Before it was just, paper trail sent in and that sort of thing. So it's more formalized, and there are people who are dedicated to handling them, but it's still a slow process. And as you know, in the film industry, you can get a request from a film company 24 hours before they've, like situations like what I just described. Their drone operator is sick, or he's crashed his drone, or he can't make it, family emergency, whatever it is. And you now have an opportunity as a local operator to work for a big company like Netflix or, CBS or whatever it is. And there's no time to get approval. None. So your choices are, you either fly rogue, break the law, and get the work and get the credits and advance your career, or you don't take it. So it's very, very difficult for drone operators to manage with basically no recourse in short requests. You have to have at least 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes more, depending on the complexity and security detail of the operation.
Yeah, we have a similar setup and system here as well. Before it used to be to import, you just needed a letter from civil aviation. Mm-hmm. Now you have to go through our telecommunication authority, and that itself isn't a process, because one of their requirements over a certain weight is that you have to have permission from the police service, and that in itself could take you anywhere from 2 weeks to a month to get that letter. There needs to be an easier way, and they have an online system, but dealing with the police is not an online system. So you send an email, but you may not get a response for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah. I actually went through that process.
Have their own things to do.
Exactly. And, we understand that priorities are priorities.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make it any easier for drone operators. I went through that process. Yep. I came to Trinidad to work with Amazon Prime last year. During the cricket championships, we were working with the Australian cricket team, and Amazon Prime was airing the games in Australia. So we were hired to film promos for that. And I fly my drone wherever I go, wherever I can. I want to get that stamp in that country on my drone app. It's just a thing. And so I went through the process, and Film TT was actually very, very helpful in getting the paperwork done. So they basically, because we were working with them and through Amazon Prime, they also assisted us in dealing with the police and the telecoms. But it was a process for sure. Yeah. It was quite a long process. I've flown in other countries like USVI. You basically take the trust test, the FAA trust test. I didn't fly commercially, so it was just recreation. So that was fine. I did it in maybe 15 minutes, the trust test, and I was flying 10 minutes later. So how do you find navigating the different requirements in the many different places? So in that instance, treating the Caribbean as one thing, even though each island has their own lots of different rules. And you also are a licensed pilot in Canada. Yep. And
are you licensed in the US?
I'm not. I don't have my Part 107.
Okay.
Yeah. I was actually studying for that before the last election, but I've put that on pause for now.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
But how do you treat navigating all the regulations between the Caribbean and Canada?
Well, once you have your credentials in Canada, you don't even think about it anymore. Once you get your basic and advanced, the advanced is a bit more difficult. It's a proctored test, so you have to go through an actual physical test to get your advanced. And 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to fly downtown Toronto, which is right next to Billy Bishop Airport.
Right.
And I basically went to the Nav Canada app, put in my radius and height, and was approved instantly. And this is heavy air traffic area. There's helicopters everywhere. There's small craft.
Yeah.
There's a international airport. I think it's something like 15 kilometers away from where I was flying. And I got approved because they've put a system in place, and they have a way to track all of the drones that are going up. You apply, you hit take off, and then you take off and then land. And they have a database of all your flights. So it's easy. They have all my information, and I give them all my information, and they have no worries. It's like driving a car. Once you're licensed, and you're good to go. For my client side, I also have a 6.5 million insurance public liability policy.
Right.
But that's for my own work. That's nothing to do with Transport Canada or any, that's nothing to do with them. That's just for my own company. So in comparison, it's a lot more difficult to operate in a lot of Caribbean countries. Grenada was particularly challenging. I worked in Grenada for about 3 or 4 months on a TV series called Fortune Hotel. Right. This is their first season. And I had to go through the tourism association, who put me in touch with the police, who then put me in touch with their civil aviation. But relatively speaking, it was quite easy. But the challenge is that the 5 kilometer radius around the airport, it basically, that's basically covering a large part of the island. And that's actually where we wanted to fly the most. So we were actually flying at the end of the runway in Hog Island. We took over the whole island for a day to shoot that, and that's at the end of the runway. But they were fantastic. Once we communicated clearly with them and showed that we had all the, accreditation and certifications that we needed, all the insurance that we needed, it was just a matter of communicating clearly, and it was good. All good to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what does your fleet look like now? Because I know you have a lot of experience flying a lot of the different drones, but what is your flying these days?
Well, I'm pretty much down to like just a basic set. I've got my Mavic 3 Pro.
All right.
It's my baby. It's flown. It's flown everywhere with me. I've taken it to the US. The only place I didn't take it was Saudi Arabia, because drones are only Saudi Arabian nationals are allowed to fly. And that was,
I commented on one.
That was a difficult
have some questions about Saudi Arabia.
I got into FPV with my old Avata 1. I think you can still see the grass stains on it from crashing.
Right.
This is a beast. This thing can take a licking and keep on ticking. This is how I got into FPV. And if anybody wants to get into FPV, I highly recommend this. It's like a tank. Yep. I've crashed it so many times, and you just pick it up, dust it off, clean the lens, and good to go again. It is unbelievable. It's on the heavy side. I have 2 of them, and it is, it's what I actually flew in, this and the Mavic 3 Pro Cine in Grenada. I lost one in the river in Grenada as well. I have the footage. I'll send you the footage of the crash. Sorry?
Yeah, for sure. Have you flown the Avata 2 yet?
Yeah, that was the next one. So I've got the Avata 2. And this is an incredible drone. This is really, really sort of the ultimate FPV for me. I did get a old school, like pre-built FPV kit before I left Barbados and moved to Canada. I never, because I was so busy, I never actually got to try it. So I have like a Bumblebee with I think it was an Air 2 or Air 3 unit and the old school goggles. I think I flew it once. And then when I got up here, I had to obviously get my license and all that. So I wasn't able to fly it.
Yeah.
And then this launched and I never flew the old school one again. I don't see the point really. If I understand there are purists that love the old school and the analog and all that, but I'm like, you know what? If I can pick up a box in a store and take it outside and have some fun with it and capture great images at the same time. Great.
So I wouldn't knock that, but you see, when it comes to performance and being able to, so the avatars they perform well, but in terms of, see, you mentioned earlier, driving a Toyota and driving a Maserati, that is
fully
custom built versus
absolutely,
Avatar 2. That
absolutely.
Is like,
and I haven't gotten into racing at all. My background is media and cinematography.
Yeah.
But I have been racing on is it Uncrashed or what's the other one?
Yeah, Uncrashed. There's Uncrashed, there's Liftoff.
Right. It's
there's
Liftoff. I've used Liftoff more than Uncrashed, and I love the racing on there. So I might get into it, but work and life really doesn't get me to do the hobby as much. I don't even fly as much as I want to anymore. One, we just got out of winter. It was the harshest winter they've had in a long time. So flying in winter obviously has its restrictions in terms of battery life and, prop freezing and that sort of issue. And, we were dealing with minus 20 degrees a lot throughout the winter up here.
Yeah, you can keep that.
Correct. So, but the good thing is we live on, backing on to the back of a school. So I have a huge playground when kids aren't on it that I can practice with. It's fantastic. I might dabble with the faster FPV drones if I get a chance, but I don't think my skill level is there yet in terms of FPV. I use it mostly for, cinematography and video capture and that sort of thing, which isn't, conducive to those small units. I do have a GoPro mount for the Avata 1, which I've used, and it does give, I use a GoPro 11 mini because it's the weight. I don't have any naked ones. So the GoPro on the Avata 1 gives quite a great image, but the Avata 2 is just as good as the GoPro as far as I'm concerned. So that's basically what I use. And I don't see the need to really get into the pre-builds or the custom builds at this point. I just don't have time for it with my work.
That'll be the thing. The time and having to fix them and sit on behind them and troubleshoot and tuning and to be frank, knowing myself, I don't think I have the patience for it. Frankly. I just want to plug in and go, right? I just want to fly. It works. Yeah. I hear that. Right. Quick one before we continue. What y'all doing in October? Nothing? All right, cool. That's something fair. In October 21st and 22nd, 2025, join the Pilots of the Caribbean podcast at the Elevate UAV Summit 2025 presented by Drone Nerds. Pilots of the Caribbean podcast is an official media partner, and as a part of that, we have a special discount code for our audience. So you're going to use the link in the description to get your ticket, and you're entering discount code Caribbean75 for 75% off your tickets to Elevate UAV Summit 2025 presented by Drone Nerds. So on October the 21st and the 22nd, I expect to see all my people who could get there in Miami for Elevate UAV 2025. Now back to what we was doing. So you mentioned Saudi Arabia, and you did a stint over there working on the early parts of the line.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like?
It was incredible. So basically, I was working on Outer Banks in Barbados. I was for season 3. Right. And I get this email from a company that I'd worked for in Barbados. I think I done something for them for Discovery TLC or something like that. It's basically a fixer company that sources fixers all around the world for companies that need to find production wherever they travel. And So I get this email saying, "Hey, we're looking for producers in Saudi Arabia. Are you interested?" And I thought it was a spam email at first, but my motto is I never discard an opportunity without looking into it first. Right. And so I responded and said, "All right, well, tell me about it," that kind of thing. We had a preliminary call, and it was basically a year contract, as you know, in NEOM, which is the new region they've created in Saudi Arabia to build the line and a bunch of other, what they call, and they're not even called smart cities anymore. They're called cognitive cities. And these are basically advanced cities that they're building. And they're basically trying to compete with Dubai. Same kind of infrastructure they have to build. They have to dig out all the sand, and they're building this massive line straight through the desert, as many people have seen. And, I considered it. I said no because I'd literally just moved to Canada that year. And when I went to my family and I went to my partner and discussed it, they were like, "Why aren't your bags packed? Like, just go. It's a great opportunity." So I finished up Outer Banks season 3 in Barbados. I think it was the end of August. And I got back to Canada early September, signed my contract. And within 2 weeks, I was on a plane to Saudi Arabia. It took me 52 hours to get there because I missed my first flight. The first flight was canceled. And so I missed all of my other flights. So 52 hours door to door. And I was in the middle of a desert in Saudi Arabia. And basically this sort of, like a commune, with modular homes and that sort of thing.
So you're using the term fixed and in the context that you use in Caribbean, I understand what you mean, but something like for this project, what exactly was your role in this project?
So I was hired as a senior producer, and I was embedded in the marketing department of NEOM itself. So I was working for a media production company that had a contract with NEOM. NEOM is both the company that Saudi Arabia started in order to basically build the infrastructure for NEOM, and it's also the region. It's the name of the new region that they've created in Western Saudi Arabia. Okay. And so they were producing a lot of content to basically attract investment from the West and basically build out. But my drone experience was also an asset to them because the only way to measure the construction and to measure the development and progress of it was with a drone because it was so massive. They're basically building the line from the northwestern point of Saudi Arabia, 178 kilometers in through the desert, across mountains, basically right through the desert. And it's massive. So I try to explain it to people like, when you put a drone up and you see a crowd of people, they look like ants, right? You get to 400 feet, or if you have permission, you go higher. They look like ants. So when we were out in the desert and I was in the middle of the foundation of the line, and we put the drone up, we saw the same ants, but these ants were actually massive construction vehicles. So just think of that. Yeah. There were construction vehicles. I'm talking these mega-sized diggers and dump trucks and loaders and pile drivers as far as the eye can see. And it's working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it was amazing. I met my first camel. We went to scout a location for a shoot, and we get out in the middle of the desert and this camel just walks up to me. I could have touched it if I wanted to. It was incredible. The Saudi Arabian people are amazingly beautiful, welcoming, caring people. And, I went in with a lot of preconceived notions about Saudi Arabia. I think the West has basically, done a good job in sort of creating this stigma and, incorrect assumptions about the Saudi Arabian people. And they were all shattered when I went there. I had a fantastic time. I did work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 6 months. And it burned me out. It did burn me out. It was an incredibly intense contract. And yeah, I mean, I can't really say anything more, but like driving through the mountains of Saudi Arabia at dawn, going to a shoot to film a detonation of 10 tons of dynamite is something that I'll never forget. Like those are the kind of experiences that I had.
Right.
Some of them I can talk about, some of them I can't talk about just because of NDAs and all of that. But I loved it and I would love to go back. I definitely want to see what it's like when it's finished. 100%.
Would you give any chance? Would you do it again?
I did end my contract early. I contracted COVID 6 months in, and yeah, so I'd done Outer Banks, where I was a fixer and production supervisor. Went back home, and that was like 3 months straight of production. We're talking 14-hour days kind of thing. So yeah. Very, very intense work. 2, maybe 3 weeks off while I was getting my visa, work permit, all of that sorted to get to Saudi Arabia. Jumped straight from Outer Banks into the Saudi Arabia project, and I burnt out after 6 months. And I just had to call it because my physical and mental health was starting to suffer. And I think it was the first time I actually quit anything significant in my life in terms of work. And it hit me hard. You know, I don't like to leave anything unfinished. But I had to do what was right for me. And I was starting to crack at that point. So I would say if I was given the opportunity to do it again, I would definitely go back just so I could say that, you know what, I went back and I finished this thing.
I finished it. Yeah.
And I had a fantastic time. While the work was very difficult and the environment of the people I was working with, I don't think we gelled quite well. Being there and working and, you know, just think of it. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia was at the head of this company. And so their mandate was to cherry pick the best of the best from all around the world. I was working with people who were ex-Amazon executives, Red Bull, like, you know, creme de la creme of industry and progress. And I got to meet and work with all of them. So very, very bright people. You know, you'd be in line with lunch. You know, they have this massive cafeteria. Can't even call it a cafeteria. It's just this massive restaurant. And you start talking to somebody next to you and, you know, what do you do? And she's like, oh, I build robots. I invent robots for a living. And that's the kind of thing you're exposed to, you know? So I really enjoyed it from that aspect of it. And people from all over the world. I mean, every walk of life, every culture, every creed, it was fantastic. And I really love that aspect of it a lot. You know, so I definitely say I would go back, but you know, I wasn't actually allowed to fly there because, like I said, you could only fly if you have Saudi. Well, you can get Saudi national residence, in which case you can get a permit. But I was there on a work visa, so I basically was handling the operations, basically all the logistics and the data management and making sure that your drone operator was going to the right locations and to the right work sites. And so it was difficult to run drone operations and not able to fly. And it is a beautiful country. I mean, one of the operations we had to basically 3D scan with a matrix a mountain, an entire mountain, because they're building a ski resort in the northern mountains of Saudi Arabia.
Desert.
Sorry?
In the middle of the desert.
Well, it's actually in the mountain range. And so a couple times a year it does snow. It does get cold during winter. You know, I think it drops to around 0 in the actual desert during winter. And it snows a couple times a year, but it's not enough to have a ski resort. So they basically, we had to scan this mountain using LiDAR. Obviously, for those who know photogrammetry, you have to put down GCPs, ground control points, in order for the LiDAR to be accurate.
Yeah, for your reference points.
Exactly. So we had to basically hike this mountain, which had never been hiked before. As far as we were just, you know, we only found like camel poop and goat poop on there. There was no trash. There was no sign of human life. There was no reason for anybody to ever go up there. And it was me, the architect, a one of the designers, and they were basically scanning this mountain so that they can build all of these ski resort hotels and villas in this mountain. Absolutely nuts. Like, it was mind blowing, the experience. And working with Saudi drone operators who barely speak English, and you're just sort of drawing and signing and trying to communicate however way you know how. But I wanted to fly up there because I was at the top of a mountain, but there was a military base like a stone's throw away. I wouldn't even want to touch the drone in that scenario. So that was a challenge in not being able to fly in such a beautiful open country, you know. But it is what it is. That's life sometimes.
Oh, the line in Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, so I have had a couple other guests on the podcast that have worked on other Netflix series as well. So Ketel worked on The Walking Dead.
Cool. Where was that shot?
Is always, what's that?
Where was that shot?
In Atlanta.
Oh, okay.
So he is St. Lucian, but lives in Atlanta.
Very cool.
Yeah, so he worked on Walking Dead as a part of their film crew. I think he was a DP and one of their drone operators as well, drone and camera operators.
Nice.
But it's always interesting to hear, you know, people's experience working with companies like Netflix, because we see the finished product, but very few people get to experience what it's like, you know, the behind the scenes. And you mentioned Outer Banks. So what was it like working on the set of Outer Banks?
It was great. You know, I look at any experience as a good experience because you either have a great experience and learn positive things from it, or you have a bad experience and you learn and adapt from that. So there's no bad experience for me where I would say, well, I'll never do that again, because, you know, you learn. Outer Banks was particularly challenging for me because Barbados was on full lockdown for the first season that we did. It was season 2 that came. And basically it was New Year's Eve. I can't remember which year it was that we had the lockdown, but that was the navigating. That was very, very challenging. We had to work with the Attorney General's office to get exemptions to even drive on your road to get to location, for example. And every day we had, you know, cast members, like if we had extras on set, we had to get their, you know, their national ID number, submit that to the Attorney General's office to get them an exemption. So yeah, it was challenging in and of itself, being, you know, I think it was one of the biggest, if not the biggest production to ever go to Barbados. Multiple shipping containers full of gear and, you know, a huge crew. We booked out an entire hotel for 6 weeks, exclusively during that time. So quite a lot of people, well over 100 to 200 local crew and cast at any one time. So as you can imagine, dealing with that during the lockdown, during COVID, it was a challenge. So normally a production like that has its own challenges, but you know, COVID was an additional challenge for that. But it was amazing. You know, I learned so much and met so many incredible people. One of the better experiences of my life. I have some great friends that I've made from it that I continue to be in contact with. And they were the best. You know, literally these people were running Sony Venice cameras, which are, you know, very, very high-end cinema cameras. They were running them run and gun with easy rigs.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, that's how they shot the entire show. Rarely do you see a tripod. Sometimes, you know, the set won't have a tripod on the ground for the entire day.
Wow.
These people are all running run and gun. I'm exaggerating a little bit. Obviously, there was tripods in every iteration of gear that you could find, but the entire thing was shot with run and gun, easy rigs, with specialty lenses. So it was extremely well done. Gonzalo Amat, he was a DP, one of the best DPs I've ever seen, and very, very nice people. So, and they're all from South, the Carolinas. So Southern hospitality, you know?
Okay.
It was a great experience.
Do you have a most memorable project? Because I mean, if we sit down here and go through, you know, all the big projects that you've worked on, this could be a 15-hour long podcast.
Well, I think Outer Banks pretty much is one of the biggest ones. You know, one of the best things is when you get called back for after you finish a job, you know, and they called me back for season 3. I was already living in Canada. So right after season 2, I moved to Canada. It was already on the plan. And they called me back. So I flew back down, and basically scouting for that job was great. Used the drone every single day. Had pretty much, you know, all my permissions sorted for I think it was 2 weeks straight of scouting. And they basically decided I had, part of my job was to find a good cave. Because if you remember, no spoilers, but there's a scene with caves, and I had to scout every single cave in Barbados. Some of them were fairly scary. I was 200 feet underground at one point. But they went with the commercial Harrison's Cave, where you could actually drive a tram down into it. Obviously, it made logistics a lot easier, and safety was, you know, less of an issue. That was definitely one of my most memorable jobs. Basically, myself and the crew, and it had to be a limited crew because only a certain amount of people could go down in the cave at one time. But we were spending 12 hours a day down in a cave, 200 feet underground. Yeah. And you start to get delirious. You know, you start to like, you can't tell which way is back up or down. You start to lose your sense of direction. And you're also around a whole bunch of sweaty, smelly people as well, because you're all crammed around one scene, right? And there's water dripping through from the stalagmites and stalactites onto your gear. We ruined 2 Inspire 2s within 2 days on those shoots, just from the water and the condensation. They were done. So we were flying, we were flying the Inspire 2s. I was the second op, and basically flying within Harrison's Cave underground with water falling on it. We got the shots, but at the expense of these, and the operator's like, you know what? This is part of my job. These are pretty much expendable. That's what I have insurance for. And so, yeah, it was, one of the better. And then I think we lost another Inspire 2 in some trees, a bit later on. This guy he flew it like a FPV. how we fly sort of disposable FPVs, you know, how we could crash these. That's how we flew it, is because basically, you know, a lot of drone operators say if you don't crash it, you're not flying it hard enough.
Yep.
And, you know, a lot of people make fun of people that crash a lot, but if you don't go for it, you don't get the shot, right? So that's my motto. You just got to go for it. And that's what he did, but with, you know, $7,000 drones. So,
but with $7,000 drones.
Yeah. It's a different game. It's a different ball game altogether. But Automatics is definitely one of my most memorable ones. Great people, and you know, it was my first international official credit on a television series on Netflix. So that was significant for me, and it opened a lot of doors.
So and as next day, so what's next for Phil Archer?
Well, about a year and a half ago, I decided I was done with travel. That was basically when I finished with Saudi Arabia. I came back and I had to take a short sabbatical. I took a sabbatical for about 3 months, and I was just like, you know what? I need to heal. I need to, you know, focus on my health and my sanity and making sure that I'm 100%. And basically in 2017, I had said to myself, I want to travel for work. And I am a firm believer in manifestation, and boy, did I manifest travel for work. I traveled for work consistently for about 5 years. And it was fantastic. I loved every second of it. You know, I miss my partner a lot. I miss my kids a lot, but it fulfilled that part of me for my career that I wanted to achieve. I traveled the world. I traveled throughout the Caribbean. I can't even count how many Caribbean countries I've flown in, but a lot, most of them, English speaking Caribbean. And I feel like I've achieved that. And, I decided, you know what, I'm done with travel for now. I moved to Canada. I want to be able to settle in Canada and establish myself, because when you travel that extensively, you basically lose your roots. you don't feel like you belong to any single country. It's a weird feeling. I don't know how else to explain it.
Yeah.
Barbados will always be home, but when you're traveling that extensively, it changes who you are as a person, first of all, because you're interfacing with all walks of life, which was my favorite thing about traveling, is just meeting incredibly diverse people, interesting people, and getting to know them. And, I'm going to miss that part, but I've decided I wanted to settle and work in Canada. So I spent about 6 months looking for the right job, and I found it. I'm working. It's not drone related, but I do get to fly every now and again when a shot's called for it. But it's basically a agency that focuses on executive leadership, thought leadership for C-suite executives. So, for example, most of our work goes on LinkedIn, and we work with clients like PwC, KPMG, Indeed.ca. And we basically enable them to become thought leaders on social media. And so we're working with basically I only work in the financial district of Toronto.
Right.
And it is extremely rewarding. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with something called the knowledge economy.
Yeah.
So basically, this is what that is. So they're basically leveraging C-suite executives and tapping into their knowledge and experience through the knowledge economy. And I'm the creative producer for this agency. Okay. And so I get to interface with some of the brightest minds in Toronto and around Canada right now. I'm talking about AI experts from Canada, the US, all around the world. CEOs, we do a CEO series. So I'm talking about like some of the top minds in executive thought leadership. And I can't really express how rewarding that is because I'm getting paid to basically learn. I have a direct, I have a direct tap into the vein of the knowledge economy. And I'm not only that, but I'm recording it and filming it and documenting it. So I get to several times a month, I get to go and sit and listen to these very, very experienced and intelligent people share their knowledge. And it is extremely, extremely rewarding to be able to do that. And then take that footage and create little video sound bites that people find very valuable on social media. So that's basically what I do now. Yeah. And it's stable. It's mostly work from home, which is fantastic. That's a completely new scenario for me. And, it's a completely different dynamic, actually having stability in my life and not sort of having to jump from one country to the next or from one job to the next and not knowing, you feel confident in yourself when you're working on a more of a freelance basis that your experience or your knowledge will get you work down the line. You have that confidence because it's happened for years and years. But when you have a stable sort of 9-to-5 work from home job, that concern completely goes away. It's a completely different level of comfort and stability that I'd never really experienced before. So, I'm really enjoying it. The company is called Trends.ceo. It's a small startup.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's doing very well. We recently just got invited to a LinkedIn event because our metrics are basically crushing all of LinkedIn's benchmarks by 50% and more. And so we were invited to speak on basically how we're achieving that with the CEO of PwC. And so it's very rewarding and I'm enjoying it so far. But not that much drone operating. So I'm filling my time in with after hours.
After hours FPV sessions.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's an interesting perspective, because you look at lots of people, including myself, would say things like, I want to travel and see as much as possible, work or otherwise. And then, you've talked to somebody who's done it and it's like, it was nice, but there's a price to pay for that.
100%.
Yeah, now it's 100%. Just, I want to do anything but.
Yeah, I mean, there's a time and a season for everything. And if I'll say this, if you have the opportunity to travel for work, take it and run with it. Like, it is a life building experience. It builds who you are as a person. It changes your character. It opens your eyes. It takes away myopia. It is one of the best life lessons I have had, is working in different countries. And so I would definitely recommend to anybody, get out there, broaden your horizons, get out there and travel. But as you say, it does come at a price. You know, you're not close to your loved ones all the time. The work schedules and the travel schedules are very demanding at times. And, you know, travel these days, let's face it, travel these days kind of sucks, especially when you're walking with a bunch of cables and drones and batteries that look like,
yeah, and you're
I'm not going to say the word, but
yeah, we know what they look like.
Basically, you get stopped at every security. You get swabbed at every security. You know, you have something like this. They want to know what it is, essentially, especially going to certain countries. So that aspect of travel isn't great, but, you know, like everything in life, there's pros and cons to it, and you have to know what you're getting into. And if you don't like it, you can always stop. But, I can't say I'm not going to travel for work again, but I definitely felt like with the transition of moving to Barbados while traveling, moving from Barbados to Canada while traveling for work was extremely challenging, because I never felt rooted in Canada for the first couple of years, because I was always traveling. So, you know, when I think I'm a lot more established as a person here in Canada now. That's how I feel. Like, I feel like I have roots finally, in my new home. And I can't say that I'm not going to want to travel for work again, because I did love it. But, I definitely need to plant my roots a little bit, at least for a couple of years. But, you know, definitely recommend travel for work. 100%.
Well, what advice do you have for the guys who in your region who say, hey, I have seen Phil's work and I want to be a part and do some of the things that you've done and be a part of? What would be your advice for someone in that situation?
Well, I have this motto that I live by. Another one, not the one about that I mentioned earlier. Basically, this motto is, and it's a saying, actually. It says, luck is when preparation and opportunity meet. I'm paraphrasing, right? Mm-hmm. And so the CPL job, for example, I had just, I think maybe 3 months prior to that opportunity calling, gotten my CARICOM certification done so that I could potentially travel for work in the Caribbean without having to worry about work permits. And that's just one example of that saying coming into practice. I was preparing myself for any eventuality. If I decided I wanted to work and travel. So I basically put all things in place for me to be able to do so, which was, I had my drones, I had all my gear that I needed to travel. I had, you know, everything prepared. I had my visa, my passport ready and set, and I had my CARICOM certification. I think they've actually done away with the CARICOM certification now, and it's seamless.
I believe so.
I could be wrong, but I think they've made it a lot easier, which is fantastic. But essentially the lesson is prepare yourself for any opportunity, because if you're not prepared to take it, then you can't take it. Right. So it's sort of like having that mindset of, I'm ready for anything. I'm just going to take the opportunity, whether I think I'm ready for it or not, because sometimes your self-doubt plays a lot on your mind. I think people tend to underestimate their abilities, right? And my thing is, you know what? Just go for it. If you fail, the worst is going to happen is you're going to learn from that failure. But if you don't fail and you get through, then you've, you know, achieved something new. Yeah. So I would say, don't be afraid of failure. Make sure you prepare as much as possible. A lot of Caribbean, as it pertains to actually logistically flying legitimately in the Caribbean, a little life hack that I learned from moving to Canada. You can spend 10 Canadian dollars online, open book lesson, and get your basic certification in Canada from anywhere in the world.
All right.
And that actually allows you to travel and fly in a lot of different countries. If you have that basic certification, it shows that you have a certain level of knowledge and experience with drones. And that's how I've advised that to quite a few Caribbean pilots, and that allows them to be able to fly to different, because there's no certification in Trinidad. There's no certification in Barbados. As far as I'm aware, there's no certification anywhere in the Caribbean.
Anyway. Yeah.
So Part 107 is a lot more difficult to get, and you have to do it in person. The Canadian basic certification is all online. It takes about 30 minutes. You can have Google open for any questions that you don't know. Fully open book. And that will open your door to travel and be able to take your drone in a lot of different places. But you do still have to, I would recommend doing it legitimately. Contact the local police wherever you go, contact CAA wherever you go. It's sometimes not as straightforward, and it's difficult to find resources online on how to get approved to go to a different country. But I definitely recommend it. So, and obviously self-promotion, shameless self-promotion, put your stuff on social media, network, join associations, join the Caribbean associations. In terms of media and drone, there's a Trinity Drone Association I joined.
That is the Facebook page.
Correct. So I basically scoured all of those social media pages throughout the Caribbean, because you never know when you're going to need some batteries, right?
That's true.
And that networking is king. That's word of mouth is how you get through. I did advertise my services a lot on my website, and I spent some money on SEO, but word of mouth is king, really. Yep. And that's basically been my experience.
So a last question before I let you go. Your role now is a little different to what it has been in years past. So let's take it from the fixer role perspective.
Mm-hmm.
What is one thing you wish you knew about that industry that you knew now before you chose it as your career or as your industry of choice?
Repeat that question again.
What is one thing that you wish you knew about that industry that you knew now before you chose it as your career of choice?
In terms of being a fixer?
Yes.
Well, that's the thing. I never really chose to be a fixer. I pretty much fell into the role. I started off as a producer for television and basically advertising. That's what I specialized in, corporate advertising and that sort of thing. And 2018 is when I first learned about becoming what a fixer was. I was one before I even knew what the term meant. With that first job in 2018, I would definitely say that I wish I knew how much accounting and numbers is involved in terms of finance and management and that sort of thing. I always assumed being a fixer or being a producer, executive producing is a completely different thing. That's dealing with the money and the finance and that sort of thing. But producing, you have to manage a budget. You have to make sure that all the budget is accounted for. You have to make sure all the numbers are straight. And I didn't expect that. I was expecting more of a production role. So being on set and being involved in the actual day to day. Being a fixer and being a producer, you're rarely on set. You're in the production office most of the time. So my love is always being on set. I love the atmosphere. I love the camaraderie. I love the process of creating something from scratch out of nothing with just human talent. That's something that really something that I'm passionate about. I didn't expect to have to be in front of a computer 80% of the time. And that was a reality. You have to make sure that everybody's paid on time. You have to make sure all the accounting is straight. You have to make sure all the spreadsheets add up and reconcile properly. And then you have to work with the accounting department. So it's basically like running a small business. And that's something that I didn't expect going into it. I learned so much from that period, 2018 to now, in terms of production finance, production business. The art of production business is completely different to accounting outside of production. Production accounting and regular accounting, two different animals, completely different.
Oh, okay.
Just in terms of the approach and how budgets are managed and that sort of thing. So I would say, you know, if you want to get into the fixer role or the fixer production role, definitely take some production finance courses, some production accounting courses, learn the software out there. That's definitely something that I didn't expect going into it, that I had to learn just by doing it. Yeah, that would be my answer, is production finance and accounting. So, you know, I had a lot of production experience being on set, managing crew, managing cameras and that sort of thing. But when it got to the higher tier productions like Netflix or Sky TV or that sort of thing, it's definitely the business side of it was something that I had to learn and you know, didn't quite grasp before I had to do that. Yeah.
As you know, since I've started asking that question, it's always nice to hear all of the different perspectives and responses that question has gotten. It's been very interesting.
Really? Like what else, if I could ask you?
So that question actually came from me being asked that question for the very first time.
Okay.
In terms of what I do. And my response was, and it's similar, I didn't expect how much time I would spend not flying.
Yep. That pretty much is the same answer.
Yeah. There's a lot of meetings, safety meetings, methodology statements, explanations. You know, it's like 80% or 90% of the time you spend paper.
Logistics.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%. 100%. Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, a lot of people think that it's a very sort of easy job, because you're basically just, you know, flying a remote control, something that looks like a toy. You know, this is a sort of production quality beast. This is the Cine Pro. It looks like a toy. So a lot of people look at it and say, oh, you're a drone operator. Oh, that's cute. That must be fun. There's a lot of logistics involved. There's a lot of training. There's a lot of preparation. There's, you know, understanding airspace, and the different rules when you're flying internationally. Obviously, each civil aviation has their own rules. They have their own way of doing things. It's quite a lot.
Yeah, it is. And that's all of that is before you even get to talking to our client and what it is they are looking for and explaining to them how to get or what maybe even be possible, not possible based on what they want. And that is a whole other thing.
That's completely separate to what we just discussed. You know, the logistics part of it is, I would say, 80% of the job. You know, flying is the icing on the cake. You know, it's lighting the candle almost, but making sure that people trust you, I think, is the most crucial element of being a drone operator, because there is an element of risk involved. Let's face it, you can hurt somebody, you can injure somebody, you could damage property, that sort of thing. The risk is always there, but being prepared and letting people know that you know what to do in a risky situation, or if there's a failure, I think that element of trust is the most important. Letting them understand that you know what to do if something happens or when something happens, and that you have, you know, plan A, plan B, contingencies, redundancies, that sort of thing.
As exactly that, because we fly in a lot of oil and gas plants.
There you go.
And for persons who aren't familiar with drones and, you know, using drones for certain purposes, your first question is always, is it intrinsically safe? And the answer is no, because there is no intrinsically safe drone, but here's how we manage that risk and make it as low as possible.
Exactly. Mitigation is key, for sure. For sure. And, you know, I had to share airspace with helicopters, at Brian Lara Stadium for the final, and that same CPL. Yeah. And the funny thing is that everybody else on the team were more concerned about safety than the helicopter pilots that I was working with. I was in full communication with them at all times. I was in communication with the drone police. We were up on the top of the entrance of the Brian Lara Stadium, and they had comms with the helicopter team. The Prime Minister actually landed in another helicopter. Right? I can't remember which model it is, but we were sharing airspace with a couple of helicopters, and they weren't concerned because obviously to get to that point where you're flying a drone for a broadcast, for cricket, with police, et cetera, they understand that you have these certifications and this experience to be able to do it. And they're not concerned. Once you have communication, that's key. It was everybody else who is not around, like sort of in the periphery that were like, oh shoot, there's a helicopter. They were the most concerned because they're less informed, right? So it's dealing with those fears and dealing with that paranoia is just a part of the job. So I don't think that's going to go away.
No, hopefully, the more we could educate people, the less of it. But I don't think it ever goes 100%. Away for people.
It's all about education.
Involved in it.
Yeah. Totally agree. And you're doing a great job in doing so. Obviously, this podcast is fantastic in educating the people. Hopefully, we get it to more people who are not as familiar with the industry as we are. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. And thank you for coming on. Before I let you go, where can people see your work, find out more about you, get in contact if they want to, do some work with you?
Absolutely. Well, all of my social media is at Phil Archer. So I got in early because I'm older. So I have all my name ats, and my website is philarcher.tv. So you can find all my links and ats on that.
And I will make sure to include that in the descriptions for this episode. Phil, thank you again very much for coming on this episode of the Pilots of the Caribbean podcast. And it was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much, Alan. Really appreciate it. Had a great time, and can't wait to see it.
Yeah, man. Take care.
Cool. You too. Take care. Bye.